Hi everybody, it's been a while since we last talked. Today we're going to move further into Chapter 4 and get closer to the end of it. We're going to be taking care of sections 4.4 and 4.5. And here's the key title, the key theme of these two sections: the equation of the line. These two sections that we're going to cover are going to be dominated by, for the most part, writing the equation of the line, actually taking some data and writing the equation of the line. Now, this section begins with letter A. The different concepts that we're going to be talking about, they're going to be identified by capital letters, and all of these capital letters are going to come under this umbrella title called the equation of the line. So we're going to begin with something that we have already looked at from 4-3, finding the slope from the equation. Now, here is what letter A is going to be about. Letter A is writing the equation of the line in slope-intercept form and in standard form. And here's the data that's going to be given to us so that we'll be able to write that equation. We're going to be given the slope of the line, and we're going to be given the y-intercept. So here is how we want to begin this so we can identify slope-intercept form. We want to begin by looking at this equation right here. This equation should somewhat look familiar to you in terms of what we've already been able to identify by an equation that has been solved for y. So let's begin. Y is equal to 4x plus 7. If I were in the room right now, I would ask you, based on what we just learned in 4.3, what can you tell me right now about this equation? What do we know about this equation at this point of Chapter 4? And I believe there would be hands that would go up and they would say, we know that the slope of the equation is 4. And you're right, because if the equation is solved for y, the coefficient of x is always the slope. So the slope is 4. That's what we know right now. Well, then here's a follow-up question that oftentimes is asked of me. I know that when the equation is solved for y, the coefficient of x, the 4, is the slope. I'll get asked this: is there any purpose of the constant term 7? Does the constant term positive 7 serve any purpose? And it does. What about the 7? It does. The 7, I'll just give it to you right now, the positive 7 is the y-intercept. Now, how can we show that that positive 7 is the y-intercept? Well, let's go back to 4-2 when we were graphing an equation using the x-intercept and the y-intercept. Question that was raised back then: how do we find the y-intercept? How do we find it? We find it by doing the following. If we make the structure of an ordered pair, to find the y-intercept, we let x be equal to 0, and we solve the resulting equation for y. Well, let's do that for this equation. Let's find the y-intercept for this equation. Let's let x be equal to 0, and now we'll solve this equation for y. So I'll come up and I'll substitute 0 in place of that x. And notice what our value of y is going to be. If we multiply 4 times 0, we get 0. And 0 plus 7 would give us the value of y, which is 7, which happens to be that number right there. People, when an equation is solved for y, not only can we identify the slope of that equation, which is the coefficient of x and which is 4, but we can also identify the y-intercept without showing any work. The y-intercept will always be the constant term that is at the end of the equation. This is the slope. This is the y-intercept. Therefore, we have a name that is given to any equation that is solved for y. The name that's given to it is, it's called the slope-intercept form for the equation of a line. Right in the title, it says slope-intercept form. The slope-intercept form for the equation of a line is any equation that is solved for y. Slope is 4, y-intercept is 7. We have this equation already written in slope-intercept form. So now we're going to look at the algebraic format for the slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form, I would imagine that many of you people have seen this or maybe even remember it to this day, is y is equal to mx plus b. The m is the slope and the b is the y-intercept. Why was b likely the letter that was chosen to stand for the y-intercept? Because I believe it's this for this reason. When we talk about an equation written in standard form, which is ax plus by is equal to c, the b is associated with the y in the standard form. I believe that's the reason why the lowercase letter b is used to stand for the y-intercept in the slope-intercept form. So, here is what letter A is going to be about. We're going to be giving you data. This data right here. We're going to be giving you the slope and the y-intercept. And we're going to be asked to write the equation of the line in both slope-intercept form and standard form. Well, we already have our formula right now for the slope-intercept form. Y is equal to mx plus b. So we're going to do these three problems that are right up here, and we're going to write both of them. We're going to write the equations in not only slope-intercept form, but in standard form. And we're going to start with number 1 right here. Here's the directions. Write the equation of the line in standard form and slope-intercept form that has, now here's our number 1, that has slope 7, and it passes through the point 0, negative 6. Now we want to emphasize this point right here, people. This point is not just any point. This point is the y-intercept. Why again? Because to find the y-intercept, you must let x be equal to 0. And as long as x is 0, whatever the y value is, that is your b. That is your y-intercept. You will only be given a y-intercept if the value of x is 0. If the value of x is not 0, that ordered pair is not a y-intercept. But if the value of x is 0, your y value, in this case -6, is the y-intercept. So, we're going to start off from number 1, and we're going to take this data and we're going to write it in slope-intercept form first. Now, I'll just note it. M is equal to 7, and it passes through the point 0, -6. First thing that we're going to do is put it in slope-intercept form. So we write our formula. Y is equal to mx plus b. And now we're going to take the data that's been given to us on number 1, and we're going to substitute this data into this formula, and we'll have our equation of the line in slope-intercept form. You bring down the y, it stays. You bring down the equal. In place of m, we put our slope, 7. Bring down the x right next to it. And then we identify our b, which has our y-intercept. This is our y-intercept, and that -6, that's your b. So you don't have to bring down a plus sign. You can just bring down the -6. There's our equation in slope-intercept form. Now we're gonna write the equation in standard form. So I'll put the caption there. We're gonna bring down this equation first because this is where we're at. Now we go back and we identify standard form. Standard form, the x and the y terms must be on the same side. The coefficient of x must be positive. There can't be any fractions or decimals. Well, we don't have any fractions or decimals. So like I said back when we were talking about standard form, look at your x term. He's the leader. The coefficient of x is positive. He's going to stay right where he's at. We're going to move the y variable term over to the right-hand side, and we're going to move the -6 back over to the left. And we'll do it all on one line. Minus y, minus y. Get rid of that -6, +6, +6, and here will be our standard form. 6 is equal to 7x minus y. Circle it. Standard form, slope-intercept form. There's number 1. Let's take care of number 2. Going to erase. Number 2. Write the equation of the line in SF and SI that has slope 3/4 and passes through the point. People look at that point and passes through the point 0, 3. That's the y-intercept. Y, x is 0. Y, x is 0. There's your b. Now let's identify that data. Number 2, m is equal to 3/4. The y-intercept, 0, 3. Let's go right into slope-intercept form. That's y is equal to mx plus b. Let's take this data, substitute it. Down, down. In place of m, 3/4. Put the x right next to it. Here's your y-intercept, and there's your b. And he's a +3, so just write down +3, circle. SI. Now, SF. Standard form. Begin by bringing down this equation that's in SI. It's the only one that we have to work with. Bring it down. And now let's get it into standard form. There's a fraction there. Can't be. Let's get rid of that fraction first. Denominator is 4. Common denominator is 4. Tuck the left. Tuck the entire right. To get rid of that fraction, we're going to multiply both sides by the common denominator of 4. We're going to write it down a total of 3 times. Once on the left, and 2 different locations on the right. One location right there for that 3/4 x. Put another 4 right there for that positive 3. Let's do it. 4y is equal to, the 4's cancel to 1's. 1 times 3x, 3x. Positive 3 times positive 4, positive 12. Now look at the x term, because he's the leader. The x term will tell us if he has to move or stay. He stays. He's positive. He stays. So the 4y is going to leave, and the 12 is going to leave. Negative 4y, negative 4y, negative 12, negative 12. Put a line. Negative 12 on the left, 3x minus 4y on the right. Pretty standard form. So you'll view it again if you need to. I'm going to number 3. Write the equation of the line in standard form and slope-intercept form that has slope negative 5/6 and passes through the point. Folks, 3 times in a row. The x value is 0. Then he is our y-intercept. He's our b. Remember, remember, remember. The y-intercept point is always the point where the value of x is 0. X must be 0. You cannot forget that. Okay, number 3. M is equal to a negative 5/6. The ordered pair, the y-intercept 0, negative 9. SI. Y is equal to mx plus b. Let's substitute. Down, down, m, negative 5/6, x, your b, negative 9. You don't need to bring down the plus sign unless you want to. You don't need it. Just bring down the negative 9. Circle. There's your SI. SF. Bring down that equation that we just wrote, because it's the only one that we have to work with. And now let's get rid of the fraction. LCD, 6. Tuck. Tuck the right. Write the 6 down 3 times. Once on the left, and 2 different locations on the right. There, there. Multiply. Let's distribute. The 6's say goodbye. 1 multiplied by a negative 5x. Negative 5x. Negative 9 times 6, negative 54. Look at the x. The coefficient is negative. He can't be negative. He's got to be positive. He'll move. We'll move him over to the side of the y term so that he'll become a positive 5x, and that'll be the only move that we need to make. Positive 5x, positive 5x. 5x plus 6y is equal to negative 54. He's happy. He is standard form. So in summary, before I leave it, capital letter A, writing the equation of the line in slope-intercept form and standard form, given the slope and given the y-intercept. This is where the introduction of the slope-intercept form is first seen. Because whenever an equation is solved for y, the slope and the y-intercept can be clearly seen right from the equation. That's why it's called the slope-intercept form. So that is letter A. And now as we move to letter B, Kristen, am I okay on some time? All right, as I move to letter B is also going to be making use of the slope-intercept form. Here's letter B. The key word is graphing. Graphing the equation of the line using the slope and the y-intercept. In letter A, we wrote the equation of the line using the slope and the y-intercept. Letter B, we're going to graph the equation of the line using the slope and the y-intercept.